we left off talking about Thucydides' description of the lawless extravagance that enveloped Athens during the plague in the second year of the Peloponnesian War. Men did just what they pleased, he says, coolly venturing on what they had previously hidden from view. They resolved to spend quickly and enjoy themselves, regarding their lives as things of a day. Fear of the gods, fear of the law. There was no restraint. No one expected to live long enough to be brought to trial for his offenses. Each felt that a far more severe sentence had already been passed upon them. And Catherine Colitis in the Atlantic Monthly's What the Great Plague of Athens Can Teach Us Now says that the plague was a test. It tested the citizens of Athens. It was a test that the citizens of Athens failed. It revealed something about them, to them, that they could never forget, and that ultimately would be the downfall of their own regime, which was their absence of real character. The Athenians didn't care about the law because they believed in it. They cared about the law insofar as they feared that they might someday get caught. They didn't care about honor because they thought doing the honorable thing was truly good for a human being. They cared about honor only insofar as they could be seen. When they weren't seen in the dark corners of life, they did as they pleased. The Athenians were really something like hedonists, selfish, self-interested, short-sighted. That's who they really were. The plague was, for them, a little bit like what the Ring of Gyges is in Plato's Republic, which, by the way, is right over here. Plato's Republic, which you can read in Government 6, beginning of, I'm going to say, book 3. Is it book 3? Book 2. Beginning of book 2. Glaucon, one of the characters in the Republic, says to Socrates, all right, if virtue's so good, defend it. Defend it as something that's good in itself. Defend the idea that I should be good even when no one can see me. And he tells the story of the myth of the Ring of Gyges. It's this ring that when you turn it toward yourself, you become invisible. It's found by a shepherd. And a shepherd is really sort of the most obscure type of person you can imagine, out there in the field sleeping with the sheep, moving, nomadic with the sheep, and lacking in any, not even in society, much less possessing social status. Powerless, obscure, poor, dirty, tired, hungry. That's the shepherd. The shepherd finds this ring, figures out that when he turns it toward himself, he becomes invisible. He hears other shepherds talking about him like he's not there, and he turns the ring back. He is visible again. And what does the shepherd do with this ring? Well, the shepherd uses it to sneak into the palace, to kill the king, to sleep with the queen, and to make himself king. That's what anybody would do if they could. Glaucon says anybody would do what's conventionally thought to be bad if they could get away with it. The only reason we don't do what's conventionally thought to be bad is because we're weak. We're likely to get caught. We're likely to be seen. We don't have the ring. And he asks Socrates in the Republic to defend virtue, to defend goodness for its own sake. He says, can you give me a defense that's so powerful that even if I had this ring, I would still be good? In Colitis' view, that's what the plague of Athens is for the Athenians. It shows them who they really are, just like the ring would show you maybe who you really are. Or it's a little bit like Groundhog Day, that old film with Bill Murray. Well, Bill Murray's a miserable, grouchy, misanthropic guy, news reporter, anchorman type. He's sent to Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania to see if Phil, the groundhog, comes out or doesn't come out. It's going to be an early spring or not. He's just terrible to everybody around him and a miserable person. And he's beset by this kind of cosmic accident where every morning he wakes up and it's Groundhog Day all over again. He can't escape being in Punxsutawney. He can't escape this awful assignment to report on the groundhog. And as he keeps repeating the same day over and over again, of course, the first thing he realizes is that kind of repetition is sort of like the ring. It means that he can't really be held accountable. He gets to start the same morning tomorrow, regardless of what he does today. Once he realizes that, he can time things perfectly to steal the gold from the armored truck. He can figure out exactly what to say to manipulate the woman he wants to seduce. He can get money and sex and power because he never has to pay the consequences of being seen. He's the only one who knows that the day is repeating itself over and over and over again. Well, even though he gets all those things, he continues to have to live with himself. And he is a grouchy, miserable, misanthropic person. And to live with that kind of soul every day is not a happy experience, even if you have money and power. Even if you can get everything you want, you have to live with yourself. And through sheer repetition of kind of the punishment of living with himself, he comes to realize that the only way out of this repetition of having to live with himself, his miserable self, over and over and over again, is to become somebody different. And so he slowly and grudgingly opens his heart to the world, and that begins a process where it becomes possible for him to live a new day. Groundhog Day showed him what he was really made of. And he decided, having seen that, to make a change. This is what the plague is, according to Catherine Kalidas for Athens. It showed Athens what it really was. I don't think so. I don't think that's what the plague was. I don't think that's what Thucydides is trying to convey to us. Thucydides' unsparingly detailed description of the plague not only allows contemporary medical researchers to make fairly good guesses about what actual pathogen might have caused it, but it also allows us to see how this plague ripped through households, how it ripped through streets and neighborhoods, and ultimately through the entire city-state of Athens, leaving tatters, just threads in its wake, where before there had been whole cloths, the cloth of every family ripped to threads. Thucydides shows us how the plague punished goodness. In the ordinary life, we might be a little bit disturbed when we see the evil, the wicked, the flawed prevail. The selfish cheater get in to a good school, while the kid who never cheats doesn't get in. The Athenians weren't tested. The Athenians were overwhelmed. The plague was like a tsunami coming in from the ocean, crashing over an oceanside town that's full of everything: good people, bad people, people who are in between. When a tsunami crashes over an oceanfront town in Indonesia, we don't say that town was tested and failed. We say it was destroyed. And that's what the plague did to Athens. It all but destroyed it. It destroyed people's constitutions. And it set in motion a process that ultimately destroyed the political constitution of Athens. Again, not because they failed the test, they weren't tested, because they were up against something far more ruthless and indifferent and irresistible than any force. What does it show? What does that plague show? It doesn't show that they failed, that their moral character was off and that therefore they deserved their fate, their punishment. No. One thing I think it shows is the fragility of goodness. Goodness is very vulnerable. When you have something good, you want to keep it, you want to protect it, you want it to last. You have a good thing, you want to put it somewhere safe. You have a good, my child makes a good drawing, I want to put it in a frame behind some glass so it doesn't get lost, so it doesn't get tattered, so it doesn't get thrown out. If you hear a good song, you want to remember it so you can hear it again, sing it, hear it in your mind's ear. You want to record it and save that recording somewhere safe. If you have a good place, if you happen to have a good place, a good town, a good city, you want to preserve it somehow. The way we preserve cities, towns, states, countries is through a constitution, a form. The people in a place, they come and go, like the water molecules in a river. They come in and they move out. They're born in and they die. So if you have a good place, you want to keep it. You have to create something that's more permanent than the people who are moving through it, than the population. And that thing that's more permanent is the form. You try to formalize the place to both describe its shape and in the process of describing it also improve its shape, give it shape. And that shape is that a political community takes is its constitution. We think of like written constitutions, since the United States had to literally the founders had to just give it a form in one moment. Some places have constitutions that grow up over time more organically. That constitution, that form, is what we hope makes a good place last over time. And ideally, we want these forms to be so reliable that they can just last forever. How long do we want the United States Constitution to last? Well, if you love the country, you think it's a good place, you want it to last forever, for an eternity. And we hope that these constitutions are so robust, even the constitution of your character is so robust, it never lets you down, that it's like a machine that runs itself, doesn't need any maintenance, doesn't need any tending, never needs repair. Of course, constitutions aren't like that. They need constant care. And they're never so good that they should be preserved totally unchanged. They need to be reformed and improved. And in order to do that, to maintain them and improve them, you need to understand them. So goodness is fragile. That's why we have constitutions, and that's why we need to understand them. Goodness needs a form. What does this mean for us? I think it means three things. One, it means that the first step in understanding is a kind of gratitude for whatever good things we have inherited. Simple gratitude for the good things that come to us that are so fragile. It's easy, of course, and it's normal and it's common to take all good things for granted, to assume that whatever good things have been will always be. And what this story in Thucydides about the plague of Athens counsels us to remember is that good things are very fragile, and we need to be grateful for them. The second thing I think it means for us is that we need to be humble. To read this account in Thucydides, it's only a couple pages long. To get to the end of that, I think, is to see in a much more vivid way why we ought to be, why we ought to have a kind of humility, a spirit of humility, when we think about our common life and about politics. Everything we know is not enough to preserve the good things we've received, to strengthen them, to maintain them, to augment them. We don't know what we need to know. And I think the third and maybe the last thing that I take from this description is an open-heartedness toward all those who suffer, to read this account, this descriptive, detailed account. And so I think to read about this is to cultivate a kind of open-heartedness, even toward these ancient Athenians who lived almost 2,500 years ago. They were very imperfect. Can't read very much of Thucydides or Aristotle or play without encountering their imperfections everywhere, their own brutality and inhumanity and vice. They're not the first human beings to be woefully imperfect. They won't be the last. They were not tested. They did not fail a test. They were overwhelmed by a disease that caused unspeakable suffering and left a level of devastation that it strained even Thucydides to describe. And so I think maybe it's enough. Maybe we don't need to judge them. Maybe it's enough just to take in their story, to let their story into our hearts, to open our hearts to them, and to leave this book with open hearts that in this moment we can extend to each other. And that, I think, is the lesson of Thucydides' telling of the plague that struck Athens.